the grand red carpet welcome for the mid-fest film, The Commandant's Shadow, screening at the Mumbai International Film Festival. So come, let's take you to show the glimpses from the press conference with The Commandant's Shadow film team members.
And welcome to the press conference at the 18th edition of Mumbai International Film Festival. Right now we are with the crew of the mid-first film, The Commandant's Shadow, and we have director Daniela, executive producer Sajan Raj Kurup, and Wendy Robbins, the co-executive producer. Before allowing them to ask questions, I want to ask the first question: what is the India Connect?
Oh my God! There's in fact, the India Connect is far more than just my involvement. I think the project started from India, and I think Wendy will tell you a lot more about how they actually met here and how the project actually originated here and how it has come a full circle.
We have come full circle indeed. Daniela and I were working for the BBC 25 years ago in a place called Gwalior, and we were making a very difficult documentary for the BBC, and we were in despair because we couldn't find the right people to film. And when things go a little bit wrong on a shoot like that, you end up talking a lot. And so I was telling Daniela a lot about my relatives and my life, and we were sharing life stories. But for some reason, when we left Gwalior 25 years ago, we never spoke again. I don't know why. We just completely lost touch. No phone calls, not seeing each other, nothing. And in November 2022, I was having lunch with a man called Neil Blair, who is J.K. Rowling's agent and publisher, and he's also the executive producer on some of the Harry Potter films. And we were talking about general documentary ideas, and when I left, he said, in passing, oh, by the way, if you ever come across anything interesting about the Holocaust, please let me know, because my father died, and he was very interested in the Holocaust. I'd like to maybe help fund a documentary in his honour. I walked away, didn't think anything more. 2 weeks later, out of the blue, I got a call from Daniela Volker, who I hadn't seen since we were in India 25 years before. And she was in a low mood because she had run out of funding for the Commandant's Shadow and was desperately looking to finish the film. And she remembered sitting in her car one night, she remembered going through her phone, who can I call? Wendy Robbins. And I remember her stories from India, and she had a Jewish family. Maybe she can help. And I had just seen the J.K. Rowling Harry Potter publisher who'd asked me to see if there was anything interesting about the Holocaust. Daniela sent me some of her footage, and when I looked at it, I had a goosebump moment. I was covered in goosebumps, and I thought, this is truly original. This is truly extraordinary. And here we are today. So we started in India, and here we are at the lovely Mumbai Film Festival.
My name is Gaurav Naruga. I work for online channel The True Hunt. So first of all, I read the synopsis of the movie, and it is a wonderful movie. Congratulations to you. So my question to you, when we talk about the technical terminology in the movies, mise en scene, staging the scene. So with the character development, how the staging was done, could you elaborate on that technical aspect, please?
Yeah, so there wasn't really any mise en scène in that we staged things. What tended to happen is I spoke to people for quite a long time before we started filming, and then put them in a situation. So, for example, bringing together the survivor and the perpetrator families would not have happened. It was part of a process, a journey we all went with together. So we worked collaboratively in terms of, them telling me their stories and me working out how do I translate this into a film, a cinematic kind of retelling, and then just filming what happened, really. That's what good documentary often is. You have to step back and let things unfold. So some things in the film are quite strange. For example, the first meeting between the son of the Commandant of Auschwitz and his sister after 55 years. None of it was staged. The only thing that we did was made it possible, and then we just stepped back and observed.
Your movie is here for the MIFF Festival. how does that make you feel? And also, what would you say about MIFF? Because it's only about documentary, short films, animation.
Well, it's an amazing festival. I mean, you realize really how big India is when you hear this, that 6,000 people, attending, which is extraordinary. And I have to say, it's just such a great honor also to be in the same place as all these other amazing documentary filmmakers that you wouldn't necessarily normally meet or see their films. So what I've been thinking the last few days is there's such a great potential for Indian international co-productions, to take these stories global. Because half of the things I've been looking at in the prospectus I didn't know about, or I want to find out more. So it's a really, for us, a real honor to be here. I don't know if you have thoughts.
Very much so. I also feel that the Holocaust, what happened to mainly the Jewish people in Europe, we've taken this film to New York, where there are lots of Jewish people, to Tel Aviv in Israel, to Berlin, where Hitler started. But this is sort of the other side of the world. And actually, it's made us realize just how relevant and how resonant these issues are of war, of what happens when we hate, of where that ends, and how we should try and talk to each other. So that's just reinforced the key messages of the film for us. And also, since I've been here as well and looked through the prospectus, I do believe that actually, I think India really has the most stories in the world. This country is bursting with fascinating tales. And I would love to see some of India's stories become more global and reach wider audiences.
And I've just remembered there's an arena here for filmmakers to meet investors. And having been in that situation, it's so important. I was lucky enough to come across Creators Inc., Snowstorm Productions, New Mandate Films, and they really carried, they took the risk. And then we sold the films to Warner Brothers and HBO. But actually, it is such a difficult process. And I think, these meeting points are so important to get investors together with their creative teams.
We were thinking yesterday, the message really to any budding filmmakers or just general filmmakers is never give up. Because Daniela had filmed for nearly 4 years and had run out of funds and actually got a lot of no's. A lot of no's from some of the main players. And it wasn't until she came to us, which is Creators Inc., and we're a company set up for spiritual content, meaningful content, and content to make you think. I'd happened to have had that meeting with the J.K. Rowling publisher. And then once we got the first tranche of funding, everything else started coming in. So the message to budding filmmakers would be never give up, because eventually if you keep trying, you will get there. And now we've got this film, Warner Brothers, around the world, and here we are in Mumbai.
My last one to you, as you talked about the bolder subjects, of course, there is a responsibility also carried by a director of the film and conveying the story to the audience. So we have got certain films on certain issue based. So are you happy with the current scenario, that how they are depicting, they're reflecting the real in terms of the real?
See, I'll tell you, yesterday I addressed this, on the panel as well, and I said that filmmaking should have purpose, not ego, right? A film cannot change the world. If you want to really get out there and make a statement and change the world, go fight the election, run for office, and make that change. But I think what filmmaking can really do is sort of really take a topic, tell stories honestly, and as honestly as it's said, it's better. There is never another agenda for films. Right? There is always, like I said, purpose. There's a small difference between having purpose and having ego. Ego becomes an agenda, right? And I'm really happy that every story that needs to be told needs to be told. The moment and the audience are very intelligent, they will smell an agenda, right? So that's what it is, and I think the responsibility is surely on the quality of storytelling, and that has to be the only thing. And I always tell people that don't let anything else influence you. When you're getting out there and making a story, do it as beautifully as you possibly can. And it doesn't matter. Sometimes the subject can be dark, sometimes the subject can be provocative, but as long as you're honest with your film, I think you're in a great place. It's only when the dishonesty of ego takes over, then so it goes into a very different place. I hope I've skirted the question very well. Thank you.
I was going to add, I think timing does play a big part as well. So, for example, with this documentary, first of all, with the funding, we don't want to give the impression that it was easy. We went to Harry Potter's publisher and, oh, there's the money. It wasn't like that. He gave us the first section of money, and then it was a long, hard struggle to persuade other people to invest until we had enough. But actually, we ended up doing a lot of the filming without the funding. So Daniela and a producer back in London, Gloria, were actually funding it with their own credit cards. We were sending Daniela to film in Israel and America with very little support. She was filming some of the interviews in her own house using blackout sheets on the windows to make it look filmic. So, we did in the end get all the money, but it wasn't easy. I think Raj is absolutely right. I mean, for us, absolutely, story is everything. Story and the integrity of the story and the integrity with which you tell it, and the filmmaker and the package you can put around it. But timing does play a part as well. Mm-hmm. So Daniela had all the characters, had the story, but over 3 years was getting no's. We then started getting some of our investors, and then two things happened as well. One, The Zone of Interest, the Jonathan Glazer film, The Zone of Interest, which won 2 Oscars this year and was about the same family, Rudolf Hoss's family, who lived on site in Auschwitz.
Fiction.
And, sorry?
It was fiction.
It was a fiction, it was a movie. And it did very, very well. And that helped us because it put the Hearst family out there in the public. And we could then say, we've got the actual family that you've seen actors play in the movie. And then obviously October the 7th happened in Israel with the Hamas atrocity. And that, again, that sort of sparked a whole wave of anti-Semitism, which we're still seeing now. And this film deals with some of those issues. So 2 things happened, a movie and world events, that suddenly made this film very, very relevant. But we already had a lot of the funding and we had the things that Raj mentioned in place. And then we had Warner Brothers buy it. So I think, you can't underestimate the timing of these things as well.
Yeah.
So one last question. The film has been seen by a group of audience in US. What was the response?
Well, we had generally quite an enthusiastic response. Partly, as Wendy said, a lot of people had seen the fictional family in the years 1943 to 44, and they were wondering what happened to them. And our movie basically gives the answer. This is basically the real story plus the rest of their lives and their descendants. So we had a very interesting response. Also, there's a big Jewish community in New York. So some people came up to me and they said, I can relate to some aspects in the film because I went back to Poland. We have the same in Israel, actually, in Tel Aviv, where the wife of a rabbi came up to Wendy and said, it has encouraged me to talk to my Arab neighbors, my Palestinian neighbors who I've never spoken to. So in a way, so far, we've had very positive reactions. And we showed it in Berlin as well, which was incredible because we were very close to where Eichmann had his office. Eichmann, of course, being the man who organized the transports of Jews to Auschwitz, and about 2 miles from where Hoss got his orders to establish Auschwitz and exterminate the Jews in 1941. So it was all that sort of area. So it was kind of very emotive to be there.
And I think the other successful thing about the film is Rudolf Hoss, the man who set up Auschwitz and killed 1.3 million people, had written this extraordinary manuscript of his life just before he was executed. And that manuscript has never been seen or filmed. And Daniela found it in the Auschwitz Museum from 80 years ago, still untouched, telling an extraordinary story. Mm-hmm. And so we had an actor read the manuscript that we filmed. So to have that voice from beyond the grave, the man who is deemed the greatest mass murderer of all time, because he was personally there when so many people were killed, to have that, plus the extraordinary archive that Daniela found, some of which has not been seen before. And, people use the words Auschwitz, Holocaust, but how often do people actually think, what does that mean? What actually happened? And this film leaves you in no doubt as to what happened in the Holocaust.
It's like, I don't know, in India whether true crime is so popular. You know, it's almost like a true crime story in which the criminal wrote his deathbed confession. That's really how I felt. I could not believe no one had ever picked up on this extraordinary manuscript written, I think it was finished about 7-8 weeks before he was sentenced to death, and giving his totally open version of how his boss told him to begin a mass extermination program, and he had to imagine Auschwitz. And to me, that was always the worst thing, that someone imagined it, you know, because you have to come up with all that. And then he had it built, and then he stood there outside the crematoria, gas chambers, transport ramps. So I have to say, it felt like you're getting a glimpse into the life of someone who did something so horrendous, but on the other hand was such a good father that his children cannot quite believe what he did. I mean, that's true.
And you have the constant dichotomy in the film of, for example, listening to the words of Rudolf Hoss in the manuscript he wrote before his execution, but also watching his son, who's our main contributor, reading a letter that he got when he was 9 before his father was executed, saying, "My darling little boy, you're only going to have your mummy now." So it's an extraordinary glimpse into how somebody could have such a double life, but actually it was the same life.
And the manuscript was decoded from a particular language.
German. So when you say decoding, yes, initially it took a little bit of getting used to it. He wrote it in prison on very thin paper, very quickly. You can tell he sometimes erased things, but very rarely. So actually it was incredible even to look at it, because it was almost like he was getting things off his chest. And once I got used to his writing, and I speak German, I am half German, it then became, actually quite easy. But I've read the manuscript now 9 times, so I think I probably am like a world authority.
Thank you, Daniela,
Thank
Sajan,
you.
and Lindsay.